thanks for playing along. Let's talk about something that's more closer to you. And we can do it one of two different ways. I can ask you about, the business, or I can just ask you something as open-ended as what do you do for a living?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I my my younger daughter, I think when she was
Mhm.
like about 10 years old, someone asked her that question. What does your dad do? And I think she gave the perfect answer. So she said, people give him money. He makes it into more money. He keeps some of the money and gives the rest back to the people who gave him the money. So that's what I do.
That is so cool. And I 100% agree with that. But let's talk about a little more of the size and scale. But what I'm personally interested in is the impact, right? I know you're in the business of making money, uh, so we can talk about the size and scale, but also you're using that money for creating a lot of positive impact. And I would love to hear a little more about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that basically, I think for most of us who end up in a lifetime with more assets than we can consume, which is a great problem to have.
Mhm.
Um, you basically have only two choices. You can either in some way recycle it back to society, or you can pass it on to your gene pool or some combination of the two. And generally speaking, large inheritances to your kids will tend to do more harm than good.
Mhm.
I think Buffett has a quote. He says that you're Jesse Owens' son, the sprinter. He says you shouldn't be allowed to start 100-meter dashes at the 40-meter line. That it's okay to start at the 10-meter line, but not the 40-meter line. I mean, if you ask someone to start a 100-meter dash at a 40-meter line, you're not going to bring out the best in them. And so uh, I was aware, thankfully, very early on that passing on large inheritances to my kids, etc., wasn't going to be as helpful, might even be hurtful. And so when you think of recycling back to society, uh, it's a little bit, it's actually very different from investing, in the sense that in investing we get to pick our spots. I can look at 1,000 stocks and pick two that I like and invest in them. When you're trying to solve societal problems, the things that you have to confront are things like poverty, education, healthcare, environment, climate change, so on. So each of these problems has had trillions of dollars that have been spent against them.
True.
A lot of it not working,
Mhm.
and so they're not easy problems. So you don't get the choices in investing. You're forced to confront tough problems, and so the rules are different. And so one of the reasons I started early. I mean, um, I think Dakshana started about 15 years ago, and we
Mhm.
started thinking about it 16 or 17 years ago. Is that I didn't want to start thinking about these problems when I was, in my 80s or late
Mhm.
70s, because I would not have any energy. And when I started looking at nonprofits that I could support and help and so on, I was very disappointed. I actually couldn't find any that ran the way I think a nonprofit should run, and I did not want to set up a nonprofit. I didn't want to do that. It's a lot of work. Uh, but because of the disappointment, I said, well, I have to at least try. And
Mhm.
maybe I'm, being delusional, but at least I can try and then come back to giving it to somebody else. And so that's what led to the creation of Dakshana. And we stuck to a few core principles.
Mhm.
And I think these principles are very important uh, to to have impact in in the nonprofit world. And the problem most nonprofits have is not only do they not follow these principles, they have no idea what they are.
Mhm.
So they're kind of wandering the wilderness. And these are not my principles. I think they're almost universal principles. And so if you don't follow these, if you don't measure outcomes, if you don't care about like social return of invested capital and so on, then you're not going to get optimal results.
Makes sense. Now, if we look at